I'd like to call to order this regular meeting of the Board of Selectmen for Monday, June 22nd. If you'll please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I will now entertain a motion to move into executive session.
So moved.
Kip, may I have a second? Sarah seconds. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Great. Okay. Channel 79, we need to go offline while we hold our executive session. We will flag you when we're ready to go back into regular session. Disappointing to me and have been widely publicized. Mr. Joyce leaves a Republican vacancy on the commission, and I've reached out to the Republican Town Committee to undertake a thoughtful process to provide a suitable candidate to the Board of Selectmen for our consideration. After the Black Lives Matter march on June 7th, I reached out to the organizer, Stephen Gomez, to follow up with him and to continue the dialogue with me, Chief Anderson, and our police commissioners on concerns over policing policies and procedures. We're going to meet again tomorrow to continue this important dialogue. Additionally, we're following closely the discussions at the federal and state level on criminal justice reform. Recently, Governor Lamont issued an executive order that changes policies and procedures for Connecticut State Police. Most of the changes have long ago been implemented into the Darien Police Department policies and procedures.
You have entered as an organizer and may now speak to any other organizers or panelists on the line. When you are ready to begin the presentation, press the Start Broadcast button on the GoToWebinar control panel to allow all attendees to hear you. This system will notify you once the video broadcast.
Thank you. It is illuminating to me that departments across the state do not operate on a common policy platform. With our Tier 2 Connecticut Post accreditation and the audit procedures that are required of such accreditation, we can feel confident that the Darien Police Department is one of the best performing departments in the state. As police policies change, our department will adapt as they always have, and we look forward to further conversations about that in the coming weeks. Chief Anderson and Commissioners Hufford and Cunningham are in the process of detailing an FAQ document answering the plethora of questions received in the past several weeks on Darien policing and procedures. The document should be published later this week. It will be published in the media, and it will be posted on the police website. I will be reaching out to a number of people, this board first and foremost, to discuss the possibility of expanding the membership of the Police Commission to 5 members. I've felt for many years that this would be a wise decision and beneficial to the oversight of the Darien Police Department. Regarding COVID-19, as of today, we have 205 positive cases, 16 hospitalizations, and 5 deaths. This is good news as we work through the reopening of our local business and agencies townwide. Diligence is still required to keep the virus transmission from spiking locally. Phase 2 reopening is going very smoothly. This is the most significant of the 4 phases of reopenings. I'm working on a new testing site so that we can vacate the Darien High School property. The Darien High School administration will be looking to greater utilization of that facility, and the goal is to hold our last DHS testing day on July 3rd at DHS and then reopen the following week in a new location. If these arrangements can be made, the new site will allow us to also be offering antibody testing for the foreseeable future. We know that it's going to be very important to offer this testing, especially to our college students who are looking to return to school so that they can go off to school knowing that they're not positive for the virus. We are still waiting on guidance on what school might look like in the fall, and we're certainly hopeful that the Board of Education will be forthcoming very soon with some of those plans. Regarding Darien road repaving, I've received a lot of comments recently about the difficult condition of our roads. As you know, we've had a lot of infrastructure work over the last couple of years. DPW plans to repave 5.1 miles of roadway this summer. I've been notified very recently that Hollow Tree Ridge Road needs some significant attention. We had a bicycle accident on Hollow Tree Ridge Road this weekend, unfortunately. So DPW is going to be out there taking a look at what we can do to remedy those problems. I am open to funding road repaving in a different way, similar to how we funded the 6-year sidewalk capital maintenance plan this year, and would like to have those discussions with the Board of Finance as time allows. The swap shop will be opening on June 29th on a modified schedule, Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays only from 9 to 1. The volunteers at the swap shop will be responsible for making sure all COVID health and safety rules are followed. We will not hesitate to close the swap shop if the rules can't be followed. Playgrounds are back open in our parks and at Weed Beach. The picnic areas, paddle hut, and outdoor fitness equipment will open on the 26th of June, and daily pass purchases have resumed at our beaches. That's it for me, Kate.
Paving of the parking lots will be taking place this weekend at Highland Farms. The lottery took place for the units at the Royal, and there are still units available in the highest income range, so people should contact the Housing Authority. We are going back to full staffing on Monday the 29th. There will still be employees working from home, but the majority of employees will be back working here on site. We are still by appointment only access for the public, but beginning July 1st, we'll be accepting tax payments in person. We're going to be setting up in room 119 so people can come in. If there's a line, get in line outside there to make their tax payments. But we do encourage people to pay by mail or pay online. It's still the easier way to do it. And we're discussing when we will reopen fully to the public.
Any thoughts on that yet?
Pardon?
Do you have a thought on when you'd like to begin?
I have a thought. I think if everything continues to go well, maybe August.
Okay, so maybe that would be more closely tied to the Phase 4 reopening. Phase 3 would be probably mid-July if all goes well?
Right.
Okay, all right. The good news is not much is going on here in July and August, so typically slower public foot traffic anyway. Okay, moving into new business, discuss and take act.
Before you move on, could I just propose that you mentioned that there's a Republican seat on the police commission?
Correct.
But under the current minority representation law, the specific law says no more than a specified number of members, generally 2/3 of the total, can be enrolled in the same party. Ms. Hufford is a registered R. Mr. Cunningham is a registered U. So currently that seat could be available to any R, U, or D. And we've already had a very qualified nominee presented to us prior to Mr. Choice's resignation. So I'm happy if the RTC can produce someone quickly, but I would offer that we should entertain and vet them both at the same time, and hopefully we can do that for the next meeting.
Would you like to entertain a motion to amend the agenda to discuss this item?
I'm sorry, I thought this was a regular.
This was first Selectmen's report. So.
But it's a regular meeting. Am I not allowed to add comment into a regular meeting? It's not a special meeting where I can't change the agenda.
Yes, and I asked you, would you like to amend the agenda to discuss this item?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Sorry,
So would you like to make that motion?
Can I make a motion to discuss the inclusion of vetting all candidates at the same time?
May I have a second? Seconded by Sarah. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Nays?
Nay.
No.
Okay. I think we have 3 ayes and 2 nays, so we will have a brief discussion on this item. And I would have appreciated you contacting me in advance to let me know. We could have added it to the agenda for this evening. It is always customary when there is an untimely resignation, death, departure of a sitting member of a board or commission that the political party for which they represent is given the opportunity to put forward a replacement candidate. And that is exactly what I've done. The Board of Selectmen can entertain any candidates to fill that particular position. We have, interestingly, we received a renomination of Sherrod Sammy. I believe I received that on June 12th. I wasn't sure why I received that, since there wasn't a vacancy for the Democratic position on the police commission. That may have become clear to me now. We also have pending a nomination from the Republican Town Committee of Brent Hayes, you might recall. So each party has put forward 2 potential candidates that this board has seen before for our consideration. And I would say that the Board of Selectmen, as we always do, will have a thorough and thoughtful process, particularly at this time, around who will become our next police commissioner. There's a lot of difficult dialogue that needs to happen across the country, here in our state, and in our town. And we have to find some solutions. One of those solutions is finding the right police commissioner. And that has to be done in a collaborative manner. This is a time for us to be listening and learning and to understand what exactly our department needs at this moment in our history. But I will not allow this board to be bullied into rushed decisions, nor will I allow this process to be corrupted by a group of people who are focusing on a political agenda and a power grab. There will be more to come on this important issue. We'll do the right thing as we always do. And I will open it up to comments from anyone else on this board.
I'd like to comment on my nay vote. Purely, I think it's a very important discussion, clearly. I did not know you were hoping to bring up this discussion today. I look forward to seeing it on the agenda. I know Jamie will get it on the agenda, and I'm absolutely happy to discuss that as to the best candidate for this position. So that was only my reason, because I would like to see it so I can prepare for the discussion. Thank you.
Sarah?
I think I'm baffled a bit by the comment that there is a bullying going on for a political agenda. I haven't seen any. I have not yet seen a resume or an application for Brent Hayes, and I would love to see that also. That would be great. Thank you.
The RTC will be forthcoming with resumes from whomever they might be considering.
I look forward to that. I'm sorry if you think that there's been bullying and a political agenda here. I believe the nomination from the DTC was put forth in anticipation of Mr. Cunningham's term expiring at the end of the month. My understanding is that he was elected to the commission as a D and has subsequently changed his registration to a U. So his seat was coming open, and they put forward the name. It happens that we have his name in advance, and the law allows for consideration of any candidate for any vacancy as long as you're in compliance with the minority representation rules, and we are in compliance with the minority representation rules regardless of whether we interview an R or a D or another U.
Absolutely. And, quite frankly, I don't follow I don't even know if Kevin changed his registration to become a U from a D. But you bring up a very good point, and yes, he was appointed to fill a partial term. His term ends on June 30th. We can certainly and will certainly be interviewing both he and Mr. Sammy to fill that position. So the good news is that we'll be able to interview everyone. Any further thoughts?
I just also
support the consideration, which will ultimately be decided, I believe, by the RTM to increase that board to 5 people. I think that's a
Thank
wise
you.
decision.
I would also-
So I have personally felt that way for quite a while, and perhaps I'll be part of this, but I don't want that to hold up a nomination, but I want this process to be thorough and thoughtful, so we do have the right candidate. And I support the 5 people, so
Thank
just
you.
wanted to be public on that.
I do too. I think that's a fantastic idea.
Yeah, since Krista brought it up, I think 5 people is a good idea as
I
well.
think I mentioned it. So.
Well, I'm sorry. She mentioned it
We talked
after
about
you
it before
mentioned
here.
it.
Yeah.
You did bring it up, you suggested it, you said you
Good.
thought it was a good idea. I'm going to go with Krista. and-
I'm glad we're all in
Concur.
agreement. I haven't heard from
Concur.
Kip yet, but I'm eager to hear from him.
I'll talk at the right time,
Okay,
not now.
okay. Okay. Any further comments? Okay, let's move on. Discuss and take action on a proposed pay plan for the non-represented employees. I have a resolution before us, whereas the town of Darien evaluates the work performance of its non-bargaining unit administrators to develop the annual pay plan for these employees. Now therefore be it resolved that the town of Darien pay plan for administrative group positions and part-time employees be adopted as proposed by the town administrator. Be it further resolved that the first selectman is authorized to adjust wages of individual employees effective July 1st, 2020, consistent with such plan and performance evaluations as recommended by the town administrator and discussed with the members of the Board of Selectmen. We discussed this in executive session. May I have a motion to approve the group pay plan for fiscal year 2020-2021?
So moved.
Okay, Sarah moves. Krista seconds. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Discuss and take action on a request to revise the approval for the sidewalk sales. We had previously approved this, but COVID had to required altering the schedule. So the chamber would like to hold sidewalk sales August 6th through August 8th. And this is subject to the approval of the Darien Police Department, which we already have, I believe. I think it's a great idea. I can't wait to get people out and back into our local businesses. So I'll happily entertain a motion to approve the sidewalk sales.
So moved?
Thank you, Kip. May I have a second? Sarah? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, motion carries. Okay. Discuss the development of grant agreements with town grant recipients. So this is just a general discussion. I think that we are all largely in favor, but I want to hear from all of you. Kate has a handout.
Well, just a quick, this is the current fiscal 20 list of the outright grants. When you look at the fire departments, those are the unrestricted portion of their funding. That doesn't include their whole budget. So just to give you an idea of the volume, some of what we're talking about.
So the thought process here is that being that these are taxpayer dollars, I believe that the Board of Selectmen should have a set of criteria by which these grants are administered and information that we receive on a regular basis to make sure that the funding is accounted for properly. In the case of the Darien Library, since their grant is so large, making sure that there is a common understanding between the Board of Selectmen and the town and the library as to the kinds of items that we are willing to fund through this grant, so that we can make sure that we don't end up in difficult situations like some of the ones that we did this past budget cycle. So it is very much a normal course of business to have grant agreements with those who receive grant funding from an agency. I believe the Community Fund has such an arrangement with all of their grant recipients. So I'd like to hear from you if you feel like that's the right approach as part of a good governance and fiscal administrative procedure. And then we can talk a little bit about how we want to go about crafting the right grant agreements. So, love your input, Sarah.
I am wondering, so I'm newer, but is there an application? Are there financials that are submitted when these grants are requested, or do you know?
Yes, and a few years ago, we created a form that all the grant recipients complete in requesting their budget. So we ask for various information, how do they use the money, number of Darien served, percentage of their clients served that are from Darien, and we ask for their most recent financials. But
Sometimes
we don't
it's a little bit
look into
loose.
what they're spending their money on to understand where the town money is going. And we don't just,
And there's no conversations like 3, 6 months, 9 months later to see how they're doing?
No, the fire departments certainly come back to us. We see in their budget what they've spent.
Right.
The depot always comes sort of in advance of the next budget cycle to talk about how the grant was used. The Historical Society really doesn't. That was a very specific grant that we gave to them to offset the cost of the climate control for the historic documents. Holiday lights are holiday lights, right? Mm-hmm. And really the public library is probably the biggest of those that I think really should be directed by a legal grant agreement. Krista?
Again, also being new to this board, I'd like to better understand what is the purpose of the grant. Maybe we could bring it up a little bit. What are we trying to achieve? Do we have a common understanding as to what that is and why we are choosing these organizations and not others? I'd love to see the application as maybe as a follow-up. I'd like to understand, if possible, what other communities like ours are doing as far as grants go. So we have some comparables to help guide our conversation. So I think those are a couple of things that I'd like to understand better before we move forward with that.
I think you should also consider, what do you want as a board? If you were going to give money to an organization, what kind of information do you want? What kind of assurances would you want to have about how your money is spent?
I think this could easily be a cooperative conversation with probably not the whole Board of Finance, but maybe representatives of this board and representatives of the Board of Finance to work together with council to put together some kind of a grant agreement.
I mean, you say, like, how typical is it for municipalities to give grants to respective bodies?
It
Very
varies.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
So that would be interesting to see.
The town of Greenwich, for example, Wayne may know a little bit about this, but they have a very significant fund, a giving fund that they give grants to. I want to say it's just shy of $1 million from which they distribute monies to their local social service agencies.
Okay.
That is not something we've ever done.
Yeah, we used to give more. And, some of it was just difficult budget times, and others was decisions of previous boards regarding the level of service that was being provided by an organization to our residents. So,
That could easily be a follow-on conversation. I'd really like to lock in a grant agreement so that that's in place for our next budget cycle. But we can always revisit if we feel as though we should be providing some funding to other agencies in Darien that, if it weren't for them, their mission would fall to town government to do. So it's worth a conversation.
My feeling is that you've got two agencies on here on your list, which are medium and then very large. I think that kind of changes the dynamics. I mean, an $8,000 holiday grant, how much do you really need for due diligence on that? Not a lot. You can say it's a good idea or it's not a good idea. We've done it historically fine. I have found that looking at the Home Depot, not the Home Depot, looking at the Depot, beg your pardon, I've never understood their financial statement. And I worry that they don't really give us a full picture of what's going on. And I think with $52,000, they ought to be a little bit more responsive in terms of how they come to us with information. The library, we put through the grill. We got a complete, income statement, and we go through every line item, which is probably appropriate for $3.98 million. So it seems to me that the amount of money being requested also will tell you what you really want to get back from them.
Yep.
Rather than hit everybody with this massive rule that give us all these numbers. We did cut back on grants for budgeting reasons. We have a lot of nonprofits in this town who do a lot of work with various groups and agencies, so that the community fund represents them in giving out money to the various agencies. So it's a balance here. We have a very active non-for-profit group in this area, and I don't think we should try to take over and become the non-profit funding source. Why do that? That's silly. It's repetitive and it's wasting government money when there's a private group that wants to give money for these purposes, which I think is right. So those are my two thoughts. One, it should be proportionate in terms of what you request by virtue of how much they're asking for. And number two, I'm not in favor of looking to find more things to grant money to, because I think that if it's really being directed towards, and most of these are not, being directed towards nonprofit agencies or things of that nature, things that we do, the town does, and other agencies do. I would not try to step into their shoes or be their funding source.
No, I think that I agree with that. I guess when I look at this list, I see it's so disparate. I'm trying to understand what our rationale is, what is our mantra as far as grants, because we have such a diverse list here. I'd love to
actually that list is based on what they requested, and just to put, the fire departments has changed within the last 5 years. We went from giving them much larger grants and not asking how it was spent, to taking over the actual payment of a lot of their expenses and reducing the unrestricted grant to that low number. But those are all based on what they asked us for.
So anybody in Darien, any organization could ask for a grant?
They could.
I'm trying to understand them.
Yeah.
Yes,
They
and
could.
agencies outside of Darien ask us
Okay.
for grants. Like
Yeah.
there's a couple of regional agencies that ask us for funding every year, but based on the fact that there's either limited to no program work with residents from our town, we don't suggest a contribution.
If we continue to have these discussions, I would love to be a part of them. I have worked with many nonprofits, and I think it would be very important to put together a defined application with financials. And I agree with Kev. I think, asking for $50,000, we should be getting
Should go
some
something.
financials.
Yeah.
I think it's important, and I think it'll help when we do the budget time. But I agree with you that we should have a legal agreement going there. That is we need to have more conversations with them than we're having.
I'm going to agree with Kip that the proportional concept is appropriate in terms of the level of disclosure and the nature of any formal agreement, legal agreement that gets put in place. I would suggest that for something the size of the public library grant, I think it would be appropriate for us to review where they are at least one other time during the year, say mid-year, and if there are going to be any formal operational metrics that we're going to apply in order for them to continue to qualify for the grant, that we should be prepared to enunciate those so that they know exactly what they're going to be evaluated on.
I also think that part of the conversation about the library grant is for us to, as this board, understand our respective feelings about the importance of local government providing funding to the local public library. There are many communities that fund their public libraries 100%, and as you know, we don't. So that would be a good discussion for us to have in terms of philosophy.
Can I go back to the fire department? So why do we give them a grant? I mean, why aren't they just in the budget, whatever their needs are?
They are separate entities. They are each 501c3s on their own.
And we have them as RCs in our budgets.
Yes, we provide a significant amount of funding to them. For some of them, we provide the majority of their funding. For others, the percentage is less. But they own the buildings. We do not. They are social organizations as well.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't fund everything that they do. We fund the firefighting operations. We fund the expenses related to maintaining the equipment that we have purchased. But if they go to a parade, we don't fund like their entrance fee into the parade. They have social events, we don't pay for those.
So that's what we take out of the grant.
Well, they can take that out of the grant. I don't think that's how most of them use it, but
It might be an example.
it might be an example.
Yeah. I would say that, they're unique. They're kind of an interesting hybrid for our town. We're so grateful for volunteer fire departments, but the grant agreement would really help us define more closely what Kate just said, the things that we maybe will not be funding.
Right, I think would love to see whether it's a generic grant agreement or whether we take these agencies and specify it to their respective needs. And then how do these applications come in throughout the year? You review them, you say yay, nay, or obviously when we get to the budget, obviously the library.
Yeah, they come at the budget time. Anybody that has currently gotten a grant gets sent something, gets sent the form to complete it and return to us by deadlines. But then we might get a letter from an agency. There's one agency I can think of that has tried every year, I think 20 years, and we don't fund them.
Right.
But somebody could send us a letter and say, request funding, and it would go into the budget, and I would be the first crack at it, whether I think it's something to put forward, and then you guys would get the next crack at it.
But should we have a statement that helps guide these applicants?
Like a mission?
Like a mission statement?
Yeah.
Well, that's one of the things we ask them what they do, but I think that's a great thing to have in a grant agreement is what is your mission statement?
Mm-hmm.
And, so if they come in today and say, this is our mission statement, this is what we do, please give us money. Okay, great, you'd like that. Put it into a grant agreement that's what you're doing, and if it changes, the grant's going to go away.
Well, I meant to flip it almost, that
Yeah.
we decide what is the criteria, what
Why
type
are we
of
doing
organization do we feel is important, how they
What
service
fits our
X
criteria?
percentage of Darien residents, their goals are, and this way I think it helps guide the applicant too as to whether or not they might be appropriate, so they're not getting turned down for 20 years. I'm just kind of thinking from that perspective, that we come out with what we feel is an appropriate use of these funds, and therefore we can judge, or you can judge the applicants based upon that statement.
So I think basically we want to do both. I think that's a
Oh,
great
yeah,
idea.
yeah.
I think you want to do, that one on the start end so that people know how they're going to be evaluated whether they'll get money, period. But then you want the agreement on the back end to make sure that.
Right, absolutely.
Pretty tough list to show what a criteria is,
Yeah.
right? Can you pick up what a town criteria is from this list? No. No, you can't. And if you do, you may end up having a whole bunch of people come in and saying, well, we fit your criteria.
Well, that's
Well, it doesn't
why-
mean the criteria doesn't mean you're guaranteed money.
No, I understand that. But now you have a whole bunch of people coming in, organizations coming and saying, well, wait a minute, that's what you're giving out money for.
But I don't disagree, but I just like to be more transparent as to what our objectives are. What are our goals in this process of
Well, some
granting
say we
grants?
shouldn't be in the grant business at all. except
That's
for
another
you.
argument. That's
Except for the
another
library.
argument. Yep.
I mean, so there's a lot of ways to go here, but
Mhm.
I'm just trying to make sure we don't end up confusing ourselves and creating a big problem when we have such a small list with a couple of big dollars in there to worry about right now.
I think, Krista, our primary goal is to make sure that we have some say or some control of how the money is spent. So that it is spent in ways in which
Yes.
the town would approve.
I don't disagree with that at all. I think that's important.
Criteria. So what are the next steps?
Guess we should try and find out, get some benchmarking from other
Yep.
towns if they have grant agreements, and what kind of criteria they might have for granting grants.
And maybe
Start
we
there.
can put together a draft and bring it back to a future meeting,
Mhm.
maybe we can discuss it.
Yeah. Okay, anything more on that topic? Thank you, I appreciate moving that forward. Long time ago. Okay, next discussion of the fire vehicle replacement plan and funding. Everyone received the current apparatus replacement schedule. You also received the Almont Associates 2013 review of our fire service and our equipment and replacement schedule and funding approaches. This discussion was prompted by our agreement to defer the $500,000 into the fire apparatus replacement reserve to really prompt the Board of Finance to think about how to fund fire apparatus in perhaps a different way. These are very large capital purchases. They have a very, very long useful life, yet we are reserving for and paying cash for these vehicles when maybe that's not the smartest way to pay. I'm not saying that it may not end up being how the Board of Finance wants to do it, but I want them to have that conversation about how best to fund. And then, for you to take a look at this Almont Associates report and to, the genesis of this report was to do a review of really all of the apparatus in our town to see if we were right-sized for the size of our community. And hopefully you all had a chance to read it and read the three potential options that this study came out with. One was to do nothing, stay the course with what we're doing right now. The other one was to pare back some pieces of equipment, and then the other option, the third most dramatic change to the way fire service is delivered right now, is to really think about fire service in our town as one fire service unit, not three separate independent units. And there's a lot, they mention it in this report, that's worth discussing, and that is the efficiencies that can be had in terms of response, in terms of cooperative purchasing, and then reviewing how that impacts the need for the fire apparatus that we have. I will say right now that we want to join in representatives from the fire departments in our conversations. We should not do this without them. We respect the value that they add to our community. But I am eager to hear your thoughts on, if you had any thoughts from our position on deferring the apparatus deposit and the Board of Finance's thinking about how differently we can fund the purchase of these large pieces of equipment, and then any takeaways that you have from this study. This is just an initial conversation for us to try and get your thoughts.
So, two questions. The report being from 2013, have there been any significant changes to the apparatus from that date? Have there been any issues where some would need to be replaced sooner than others?
I don't think so.
No, and I would say, I think the one thing it prompted, I don't know if it was the study actually prompted it or just some budget discussions previously, but they have looked, at times where they could refurbish rather than replace.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. They have done a very good job in that regard. They will refurbish instead of just a road replacement, which is, I appreciate that.
So the second question is, the report So the current monies that are given towards that account for the purchases, was that done based on one of the options in this report? Were those just amounts that we had set over the years, what it would take based on guesstimates and when things would need to be purchased?
I think it was option one.
It was, we stayed as status quo.
Yeah. Okay, and option one is status quo.
So,
Option
yeah.
one looks like in the report, not the report, but in the first couple of pages, a 3.5% per year increase in
Yeah.
expected bed
Right.
costs, okay, of these things.
Yep.
So that's what that 500,000 was for.
But we
Yeah.
made no change
Right.
in what we were doing other,
Right.
I think, they took a good hard look at when they expected to be replacing vehicles. And like I said, look to, do some refurbishment, not always replacing. But the basics of the system, funding it out of the capital fund has not changed.
Kevin?
I have a question here, because you have a consultant report that comes in, and it basically tells the fire departments, the independent fire departments, well, you can continue doing what you're doing, and you've done a great job at refurbishing and extending the life of these vehicles. However, maybe some of them are technologically and safety out of date, even though you kept them alive. Thinking of the yellow fire truck at the road, which is
it's
all
not active
cab.
apparatus anymore.
Right, well, I know. And then you've got three options, which is the first one, continue what you're doing. Another one is, well, now maybe you should buy equipment that serves dual purpose. Well, that's probably more expensive equipment, but it's a different approach. And the third is, well, maybe you ought to be one organization and figure out where your resources should be. And of course, each one has a lower and lower cost over time, according to the consultant. Well, I would like to know how the fire departments receive that report. And obviously, if the reaction is that it's option number one they're following, they probably didn't pay too much attention to it. We also mentioned leasing in here. In other words, leasing in order to stay ahead of the curve in terms of obsolescence, of technological obsolescence.
Right.
There's a lot of stuff in that report that I would have to go over again, but I'd like to hear from the people who received the report initially. Because I know that consultants' reports usually create lots of interesting hornets. And so it's not just the financing, how to do it, it's also what's your operation going to look like.
Right.
And that's a bigger discussion.
Well, remember, this was a study that was commissioned by the Board of Selectmen.
Right.
It wasn't a study commissioned by the volunteer fire departments. And I think that you're right. I think we are, by virtue of how our fire service is being managed today, that was the ultimate outcome of this study. But we have a chance to revisit some of these things, and I think it's really smart to do so. We're always looking for efficiencies. This board is committed to looking for efficiencies, especially if they create a better end product, a better service delivery. There's a lot of positive about the fire service system that we have right now, but there are definitely places where I feel there could be no negative impact to a better system. I'll just raise this issue as part of the educational process. We don't have a fire commission or a fire service commission in the same way that we have a police commission, a town body that we appoint people to. There is a fire commission, but they're representatives of each of the three departments. And there's really no mandate to them or from them to look at things like cooperative purchasing. They do collaborate on the fire training tower. They collaborate, I think, when they purchase these new pieces of equipment. You don't think so, Kate?
No.
No?
No, I don't think, no.
No. Each department
goes before the fire commission to get their blessing before asking for release of funds, but it's not like they design them together or, they may consult to make sure that, for instance, with the new redevelopment, I think that they have all looked at making sure that each of our ladders could reach the highest floors.
That's good to know.
But I don't think they worked together and decided, you buy this one and I'll buy
Yeah.
that one.
And it was interesting to, refresh my memory in this report that during the day, they largely do function as one department because the volunteer pool is very limited. But then, in certain hours, they retreat to their own firehouses and respond independently. They all have cooperative agreements. We even have cooperative agreements beyond our town borders.
And there's a lot of long-standing history to these various
Yes.
fire department groups. I mean, they're an entity by themselves, and there's a lot of camaraderie there and history.
Yes.
And so, I mean, all of that blends in here, trying to come up with maybe a more modern approach. But I think you really have to put the study out there and say, what do you guys think about this? And start that discussion before saying, well, I think we ought to go into leasing program, or we ought to do this or that.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
the two separate issues, in my opinion. The Board of Finance is entrusted with deciding how best to buy things.
Right.
So I think that the Board of Finance could decide tomorrow that they would rather see the fire departments lease their equipment than we pay cash for them. But we're talking about more operational, administrative issues in this conversation too. So I do think that we should hear from the fire departments. I think as part of the analysis, we should look at the call volumes to see how often they're responding, what are they responding to, how those responsibilities are divided up among the three departments. I think it would be a great re-education experience.
Absolutely.
So I think that probably should be our next step. And we have reminded the Board of Finance that we want them to take up the issue of the smartest way to fund apparatus replacement.
But it sounds like, besides finding the best way to spend the money, it's also what are you going to spend it on? The best thing to spend it on. And
That's our decision, to work with the fire departments
they
on
talk
that.
about in the report, this is now, 8 or 7 years old, that training seemed to get the lowest marks in their ISO scorecard or whatever it was. Well, maybe they're having a problem with the training because they are so diverse. Maybe if they had a more concentrated effort, they would be able to train, these guys could be doing this and these guys could be doing, I don't know. It's totally not an expert. I just think it's one of those things when a consultant stirs up the nest, it's time to get everybody together in the same room and find out what's going on really.
Great, we can do that.
I'm going to agree with you that the two decisions are separate, and the Board of Finance has primary responsibility for the financing of the vehicles. I hope they will consider a couple of other things, because finance is more my sort of bailiwick. So I'll just offer a couple of thoughts for you. All right, is that the current annual contribution to the fund is $500,000. $500,000 is roughly 5 points on the mill rate. If we had and I don't know, I haven't done any analysis to ascertain if they finance all the vehicles, how much debt might be outstanding at any point in time. I don't know that number. So I just picked a metric to use for exemplary purposes, which is if there were $10 million of debt outstanding at a 3.5% interest rate, which, Kate, I think that's close to where we fund at, right? 3.5%?
I don't recall what the latest rate was.
Yeah, I think it's in the ballpark. That's $350,000 worth of annual interest expense, and that's 3 points on the mill rate. And that doesn't take into account that if they move to an all-financing model, that they could return the $1.8 million that's currently in the fund to the general fund, which is the equivalent of 18 points on the mill rate. So all of those things would be beneficial to the taxpayer. My understanding is it's been quite some time since how vehicles were financed was evaluated. And I think, if I recall correctly, back at the time it was done previously, interest rates were double digit. And I don't even have to get the calculator out to figure out that the math doesn't work that way. Right. But I think in this environment, the math may well work that way. And lastly, on that point, to the extent that we finance rather than reserve, theoretically, right? If we reserve and we contribute $500,000 today, and we have, what, 6,800 families in town, if that's roughly right, right? We may not spend those funds for 7, 8, 9 years to purchase a new vehicle, right? Those funds that are
Correct.
right? So theoretically, in that 7 or 8 or 9 years, some percentage of those people who have paid taxes in the current year to sort of fund that reserve addition may have moved away.
Correct.
So if you pay for it by financing, the people who are getting the benefit of the new vehicle would be those persons who are still in town paying the taxes that fund the interest expense.
Kate, you're smiling.
The intergenerational equity is one of my favorite, you know?
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I find it difficult to tax people for something that they don't receive the benefit of. They receive the benefit of the system, but not of those particular purchases.
That said, we all acknowledge this is the Board of Finance's responsibility. I just wanted to throw that out there so that, you know, people could think about some of those ideas. With regards to the 3 options, I'm going to fess up and say I'm not sure I know enough about exactly how the different departments work, how they operate together. What you suggested, the call volumes on different shifts, you know, what role does their fire commission play in terms of, Kate mentioned that each house goes to the fire commission when they're talking about doing something, right? But I'm not sure I understand what role the fire commission plays. Are they looking at it with the eye of, is this the most efficient way for the town to do this? Could we, you know, do it in a more efficient manner? I'm not sure. I don't know if that's how they think, or if they're just evaluated in terms of within this house, this is a good idea. So all of
we
those
should bring them
things,
here.
there's a big learning. For me personally, I know very little about how they operate, so there'd be a really big learning curve. And I don't know about the other folks on the board, but I would appreciate if we could, you know, find some way, whether it's to have the fire commissioners come talk to us, or put together some type of presentation or methodology, or something to help teach us about exactly how all that works before we get too far down the path trying to muck around with changing exactly how they operate.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, going back to something that Krista brought up in the discussion about grant agreements, you should also look at what other towns do.
It just helps as a benchmark. It helps, you know, guides conversation decisions to make.
I'd be curious too.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a
Yeah,
good
I
idea.
have to agree with it. I feel like I don't know enough. I'd like to understand the role of the fire commission better and how they can facilitate this conversation, the representatives from the respective departments. And then clearly, I'm all for efficiency and saving money, so whichever way we can achieve that.
I think one of the points the point Jamie was making, the fire commission is not an independent body in the same way that other commissions in town are. It'd be kind of like having the Parks and Rec Commission be members of the Parks and Rec crew. So
Do we create a new commission?
that's something for you to discuss.
Jamie mentioned that, and in my intuitive gut reaction would be that's something we should think about.
Yeah, I think there's many conversations we should have, but let's start with an educational process. You know, the summertime probably gives us the opportunity to have the departments, representatives from the department, the chiefs, and from the fire commission to come before us and just educate us on what they do, how they do it, how they collaborate, and all of the questions about equipment and the like.
Right.
And was there a response to this report, or can they see this report again and maybe if there's any updates to it that they know of? That helps our
Well, yeah,
discussion?
there were responses back at the time. It was discussed. I don't know how strongly anybody looked at option 2. My recollection was that they didn't seem in favor of option 3. They do like their independence. But, my response would be, what's best for the town?
Right.
You want to deliver that level of service efficiently.
Correct.
And understanding that sometimes we will have certain, we'll give some things because they're volunteers.
Yes.
We don't want to be heading down the road to a paid department.
Correct.
Okay, good. Well, we'll set that up and educate ourselves over the next couple of months. Okay, thank you. We have a transfer here to discuss and take action on a request to transfer to fund the drill tower area fencing. You recall that the RTM cut this item out of the Board of Selectmen budget. I believe it's a safety issue, even though it was postured as not a safety issue, and requesting that we transfer the monies that were allocated to the 35 Leroy basement design, which I can have Kate talk a little bit about. You guys might remember during the discussions of the infamous shuffle project that there was not a will on the part of the RTM to give the Board of Education any more square footage in 35 Leroy than they had previously had when their offices were here at the town hall. So in doing so, the basement was left in the ownership control of the town. And we fully expected that we would be able to utilize that space. I think in our minds we had hoped that maybe the probate court could move over to the basement of 35 Leroy. It'd be a great location, separate entrance, all of that. But I'll let Kate take it from here on the legwork that was done to ultimately determine that you can't use it for offices.
Right, so we hired an architect to do a feasibility study. And it became evident very early on in the process. They came to us and said, we shouldn't go any further with it because you're just not going to be able to do anything. With current building codes, to do any kind of renovation there that would have two means of egress would be so expensive, it just wasn't feasible. And there was no use that we could consider putting there where we wouldn't be required to have two means of egress. And it has to be egress that, like we can't force them back up into the Board of Ed. They have to be able to get to the outside from that level. And there's all sorts of rules about how far they have to be able to, or how far we can make them go, all sorts of things. So it just wasn't going to be feasible. Sadly, the best use of that basement is going to be storage. So those funds were not used. And when the RTM cut the drill tower fence, we felt it is a safety issue. They suggested that there were funds in an account for the Norotan Heights gas conversion that wasn't planned for 2022, and I'm not sure where they came up with that because it's been in process for several months and is nearing completion. So those funds were not available for that. So I went looking, and this was one that I knew would be eaten up by the Board of Finance when they do their reviews over the summer. So I'm kind of preempting them and suggesting that you ask to take it to do this drill tower fence because I think that's important. Like I said, it's a safety issue. We don't want members of the public to have access to it. There's been illegal dumping going on there. So it needs to be fixed.
Questions?
I'd just like to thank Kate for always giving me an education in terms of how the accounting works.
Yeah, I can give you, like I said before, I'm an accounting nerd, so sorry when I do that.
We like data. Data's good.
Okay, if there are no other questions, I'll entertain a motion to approve the transfer of $45,088.05 from the 35 Leroy basement design to the drill tower fence?
So moved.
Kip moves. Have a second?
Second.
David seconds. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, great, thank you. Now, as a follow-on to that, just a note that the superintendent has expressed to me some desire, while he has not put it in writing yet, I've asked him to do so, I know he's been very busy, for the utilization of the basement of 35 Leroy. You might know that they have a copy center that sort of operates behind their the wall in their meeting room, and I think has spilled out into the meeting room now. And he believes that the basement would be a much better place for the copy center, which I can't disagree, and personally I would support that, but that's a policy decision of this board, knowing that the RTM felt so strongly at the time that we didn't give the utilization of that square feet to the Board of Ed. I think that's...
Very petty.
Yeah, thanks, Kip.
Sorry.
So
I'll say.
I will reiterate to the superintendent that when he can bring a proposal to us, that we would take a look at that.
So,
It seems like we would be willing to allow the space to be used for something when it doesn't appear that it can be used for anything else.
Correct.
yeah,
So,
Right.
it seems like now would be a
Yep.
good time for that.
The only thing that we can get into the technical conversation about having it stay in the I guess you'd call it operational control of the town, and if we wanted to lease it to the Board of Education, that's an option. So we could have that conversation.
Who currently assumes any maintenance on that space?
I'm not sure that there is any.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, is there any
It's
expense
being-
incurred?
it's- Yeah, it's being used as storage.
Not by us, by the
Not by
Board of
us,
Ed.
by the Board of
Oh,
Education.
so they're using it anyway, okay.
Yes.
So the Board of Education
I didn't know that.
operates and maintains the first floor and the second floor, but not the basement. And then
Right.
the town, okay.
If there's any electricity going,
trying to
on,
understand.
being used down there, they're paying
But
for
if the
it.
boxes are down there, I bet you they're maintaining.
Yeah, I would argue that too.
Well, it's a building, so.
Maybe. Maybe
Right.
not. Maybe they're a little dusty right now,
Yeah.
too.
So there are, and there's no need that the town can see for that space at all. Let me just make sure before
So
we
can't
formally
put-
hand it off.
We can't put people there.
Right.
Okay, so we could use it for storage, so we could go in and put shelving in and move storage that's in the basement here, and then renovate our space in the basement here to use however. But you start talking about money, serious money to do any significant renovations in our basement.
And I would say if the Board of Ed has utilization already in mind for that space, that would help them,
Yeah.
that we should consider it.
And you just, look at how much space they're gonna need for a copy center. If you remember, you've got that one big room that was
Right.
the library meeting room. So it doesn't mean that, that space will not be used by us ever, just not with people there.
Right, and that space behind the meeting room is pretty small. The current copy center
Mhm.
is
Very
not
small.
big at all.
No. I think it makes sense.
Okay, so you guys support me asking the superintendent for a proposal?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay, good, great, thank you.
I have a proposal back for them.
All right, moving on to appointments. Would it be okay if I read all of these and we take one vote, since we want to move on to our minutes and public comment ultimately?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll read all of the appointments. We are asking to reappoint Peter Van Winkle to the Sewer Commission for a term expiring on December 31st, 2022. To a new appointment of John Carter to the Monuments and Ceremonies Commission for a term expiring on November 30, 2022. A new appointment of Carla Thompson to the Commission on Aging for a term expiring on March 31st, 2021. A new appointment of Kathy Mulrow-Petey to the Parks and Rec Commission for a term expiring on March 31st, 2021. And a reappointment of Kathy Conlin as Special Constable for a term ending on June 30th, 2022. And, maybe we want to just break here and have Kate talk to us a little bit about these special constables. They work for the Tokenique Association, a private association. So they're actually interviewed and recommended by the Tokenique Association for us to make the appointment.
Right.
And Kathy was a former Darien police officer. Anybody need to know anything additional about the special constable role?
So, yes, could you just clarify what our, aside from appointing, what our responsibility, the town's responsibility is for this individual?
We have none. They typically will also do some side jobs for us. They might be the person out directing traffic at a road job. So they'll be a traffic agent. So your responsibility is to appoint them. And if for some reason their employment is severed, then you have to rescind their appointment. But we don't pay, because Kathy is a retired Darien police officer, we do pay for her medical benefits if she chose to keep them, but that's strictly because she used to be ours.
Right, that's independent of this position.
Yeah.
So I'm just, now is this correct? Because I wasn't familiar with it, that if any other association in Darien chose to have police presence, we would appoint Delaware Island.
Yeah, I'm not sure what they'd have to go through to get the right to have them in the first place. But yes, if they wanted to have somebody with some kind of police powers, yeah, you would have to appoint them.
My understanding is that they have to establish a separate taxation district and register it with the state. And because they've established a separate taxation district registered with the state, they then have the source of revenue to pay the salaries, and they are allowed to have this independent constable. But the Darien Police Department and the independent constables coordinate activities together for any policing activities that occur within the confines of the taxing district as outlined. So there's total coordination between Darien Police and Constable for anything that occurs within the confines of the taxing district. And the Constable technically, unless they're called to duty by the Darien Police Department outside of that area, don't really have any role outside of that specific area. But all of the cost is incurred by the members of the association.
My only concern was if there was any issue with this individual, what liability does the town have if we appoint this individual? That's where I was getting.
Yeah, if they're sticking to the roles of Tokenique constable, none. But if they were doing a side job for us where we were paying them, then we would have some.
Okay, so we have no liability for their behavior, or
We
When
can ask
they're
our
within
attorney
Tokenique,
who's
Okay.
here
True.
to opine on that.
She's doing a good job.
Okay,
That's accurate.
okay.
Okay, and what if this behavior, do we have the authority to rescind this individual?
Yes, and
Independent of the recommendation of the association?
yes, we have done so.
Oh, okay. As long as we retain that right.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on any of these appointments? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve the appointments and reappointments as stated.
So
Sarah moves. May I have a second?
Second?
Krista seconds. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Okay, we have meeting minutes of June 8th, special meeting. Any corrections or additions?
On page 1, under first selectmen's report, third line from the bottom, it says after unemployment, I think you mean unemployment benefits run out. I think
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
And then on page 2, Kate, I thought your report, you were trying to say, discuss plans to do an early evaluation of the budget versus actual during the upcoming fiscal year. In other words, to do an interim look at how we're doing compared to budget.
Yes.
Yes.
And
You
then,
want me to make that more clear?
well, it doesn't read that way, I thought.
It made perfect sense to me.
And then, in the last word, in the second to last line, I think you want to put if, not in.
Yes.
And my question on item number 6, do we have to mention the people who the tax appeal is about?
We did during the meeting.
Yes, yes.
So Clifford and Anna Blaze?
Yeah, it was part of the resolution that you voted on.
No, I know, but I just said.
Should they be in the minutes?
Should that be in the minutes?
Exactly.
Oh,
It
the
just says-
second, you didn't get the second, I sent out a revised version because
Oh,
I
printed
forgot
the wrong
completely to
version.
put them in
Sorry.
there.
You have both.
Okay, sorry.
I emailed them out like almost about the same time that I
I
emailed
stand
you.
Oh, sorry. I didn't-
So they are in there.
Fantastic.
Thank you. Done.
Let's just make sure that the right draft gets
Yes.
posted.
Yep.
Okay. Any other corrections or additions? All right, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the special meeting minutes of June 8th as amended.
So moved.
Sarah moves, Kip seconds. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, motion carries. Okay. Presentations, discuss request from Metro North to lease a portion of the Leroy West parking lot.
So, this is just an opening discussion, but Metro North approached us. They're attempting to find space for some of their employees for their Springdale facility, so that they can practice safe social distancing. And they approached us about space in both of our commuter lots. We told them the Roken Heights was absolutely not feasible. It is completely full, in normal times. But we were willing to consider the Leroy West lot. So what we're asking you right now is, as the parking authority, if you're even willing to entertain this idea. If you are willing, we would draw up a lease with them when we draw the lease. That has to go all the way through to the RTM to be approved because we're leasing real property. If you're familiar with Leroy West, we'd be talking about the very top section, allowing them to use that space, and we would charge them rent to offset our lost revenue. They revised their proposal several times in response to our comments about what we felt our taxpayers would be willing to accept, the neighbors, and what we were willing to give up in terms of parking spaces. Sarah?
I have a couple questions. I don't know that back parking lot very well, the Leroy West. I just don't know it. Is it typically full at the back?
No.
Okay.
Well, there are times when people have parked back there. Before COVID, there were times when people would park back there.
Oh, yeah, and I'm not saying that people never park back there.
No, I just
But
mean,
US is
is there
full.
space at the back if we were to go back to normal and everyone suddenly starts using the train again, would we find that that's a difficult, where cars are right up against? Possibly.
Some, on a typical day, yes, there may be cars up there, but it's the least utilized.
Right, okay. And then we talk about the connections for sewer and water and power. First of all, are we, the cost for these services, the electricity and the water, are we paying for that?
Oh, no.
And they're paying for that in addition to rent?
Yes.
Okay. And then, how close is this to other houses?
If you look
You
at
can see it on the map. Do you have the
picture,
map?
you can see it has the plot lines or.
Yeah, it's just a little hard. I just don't, oh, okay, I can kind of see here. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
There's a lot of trees in between them.
Yeah, okay. There's really not a lot of sightlines then. Some, but not a ton.
They
Yeah.
say there's a lot of evergreens.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's a fence there already in evergreens, but that's what they say. I haven't gone over and looked at it.
How long do they expect to be there, did they say?
1 to 2 years.
2 years.
2 years?
1 to 2.
I'll say 2.
Well, they say, let's make it 2, and then we'll have early termination rights to get out early.
I will just say that I appreciate that they want to distribute their workforce. I'm disappointed that they didn't work out a deal to do this at one of the state lots. This is the only lot that's owned by the town of Darien. And, you know, we've generally been pretty protective of this over the years, knowing that this is the one lot that we can control. I'd like to know if there is a planning and zoning process with this, because it's a change of use.
No, I don't believe we'd have to go through planning and zoning, but let me be real clear. We don't have to do this.
No, I know. I'm outlining what my concerns are.
And they did approach us about using one of the state lots,
Mhm.
and my reaction was no, because the Norotan Heights, they were talking about where the little building,
Yeah.
it was just, you know, in that area. And that lot,
It's
in
full.
normal times, is full.
Yeah, it's a full all
And-
focus.
You know, I didn't want to offer that.
I'd like to say that there's nothing in this for the town of Darien. And if it's just a replacement of revenue, I don't know that I see the point of it, other than to play nice with Metro North. So I'd like it to be more than a replacement of revenue, so that it's worthwhile and we could justify it to the people that might otherwise want to use it. That's the challenge that I see is, 2 years from now, maybe parking is in high demand, yet we've given away all these spaces to Metro North. I just have a challenge with it.
It's about 40 spaces?
51.
51.
Thank you.
What is the parking list? Where do we stand on that?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay, that was my concern. We hear from residents. Personally, I was one of those families who sat on that waiting list, for a decade.
Mm-hmm.
I have a hard time giving this property to Metro North, where we have people on waiting lists for parking spaces. I mean, if we had no list, and we hadn't had lists for, waiting list for a while, and we could benefit from it, I would be all in. But I am having a hard time with this.
Distinguish the waiting list from the Norotan Heights from the town-owned property list.
Right.
It's a different list.
Right,
Yeah,
no,
there's
right,
no
right, right.
list for the UI West.
Yeah, but
Right,
you're
yeah.
looking at that one, right?
Yeah, that's what I
That's
meant,
a really
that
good point, Krista. How many are on the waiting list right now for Leroy West? Hundreds?
We can come back with
Yeah.
that.
I just was curious.
Yeah, I
If you do.
don't
It's
off
okay.
the top of my
No
head,
problem.
no, I'd have to.
That was just sort of philosophically, if
No,
we
it's
had a
really
waiting
good.
list, how do we
It's
take
several
away
hundred.
50 ones?
I can tell you at least it's gonna be several hundred, so.
Well, and it's also, so let's say the current number of people who have those, let's say we go back to normal tomorrow, everyone's able to use the train again, we'll go back to work. Less people who have permits will be able to get a spot when they go in.
Say it again?
Less people will be able to find a spot, even those who have a permit. Feasibly, you could have people who have permits go in and not be able to get a spot, if now there's 51 less spots.
Yes. Yeah.
I'd have a hard time with that.
I also worry about, I don't know how much additional traffic will be going in and out of that
Mhm.
parking lot. This parking lot was rejected for the idea of building structured parking here because of the very difficult egress. So, it's one thing to have people come in the morning and leave at night, but if you're having railroad vehicles and personnel in and out of that parking lot all day long, I just don't know what that would look like. Or do they all just hop on a train and go somewhere, and they're not actually moving in and out of the parking lot?
Oh, no, they'd be moving in and out of the parking lot. Yeah.
One of the bullet points on here says MNR employee and truck parking, so
Yep.
I'm guessing that there's gonna be a regular
Work
flow
trucks.
in and out, whatever their normal.
Yeah, even if they are not bringing in their personal cars, they're taking the Metro North vehicles out.
Right, they were coming in and then they were switching and then they were
Yeah.
taking them.
Well, I think because one of the things we said was, no, you can't have all the space for employee parking, that they might have tried to find another place for their employees to park and have them come by train. But there still would be Metro North vehicles in the lot coming and going.
Correct.
Regardless of how the employees arrive. So, I think you're giving us clear direction, and I'm going to say, we did, Ed and I actually looked at what other properties there might be in town that, commercial properties that we could suggest to them to look at where you're going to train stations to rent, so I think we'll direct them back that way.
Is there going to be any backlash to the town for not supporting this?
No, I think we have been the friendliest response that they've received. So.
Okay.
Jamie, I know
Thank
you're working on that project for the Northern Heights station redo.
Yeah.
And Metro North is going to have a vote in that project. I don't know anything about the details to know how big a voice they're going to have in that. And I wouldn't want to complicate their cooperation on that project necessarily. But there are plenty of reasons to not want to go forward with it as it is situated. I just would highlight that as a possible, ramification.
So that's something that we can talk about, Kate. I'm not beyond asking them about whether they'd be willing to support our redevelopment project in Norotan Heights in exchange for a short-term lease. I don't know how anybody else feels about that, but.
I will, I'll talk about it with Ed.
Okay. It's really the state of Connecticut that has to buy into the Norotan Heights train station project more so than Metro North.
Right. So their voice may not be as big an impact.
Correct. Okay, do you need us to take a vote on that?
Nope.
Okay.
Nope, I
All
just
right.
wanted to get a sense of how you all felt about it.
Okay.
And,
All right. Moving on, we have public comments. We have a couple people that Kate will invite in virtually. I think we have 2 people waiting to make public comment.
no, we just have Mr. Reed Barthold, and I'm going to actually move this.
Okay.
How are we, I was going to say, how are we going to?
So
I have Mr. Barthold, I've unmuted you, so if you want to go ahead.
Can I be heard well enough?
Let me turn up the volume more.
Can you turn that around, Kate? I'm wondering if the speaker might be better than the microphone.
Where is the speaker actually?
I don't know.
Put-
Okay, try that. Go ahead.
Can I be heard well enough?
Do we need to ask Tom what's in the
I think so. No, I think with the microphone,
Okay.
I think you can all hear him?
Is the volume,
Yes, you can be heard.
Is the volume all the way up?
yes.
Okay. Okay.
Great, thanks. On Friday, June 5th, I had an op-ed published in the Darien Times calling on those in leadership positions to help guide Darien through very difficult and serious conversations on equality and justice. These June 5th remarks remain the backbone of my actions previously, today, and into the future. On Thursday, June 18th, I sent the Darien Board of Selectmen an advanced copy of the note I had planned to read during this evening's meeting. 8 hours later, through a journalist, I learned the goal of my letter had been fulfilled. Police Commissioner Tom Joyce resigned at the request of First Selectman Jamie Stevenson. The contents of that letter and the now deleted tweets will not be read for public record this evening. As they once were and as they were initially intended, the tweets can be found easily on the internet and in news articles. The moral arc of history is long, but it bends towards justice. The day comments objectifying women, defending assault, and calling for profiling of any religious group are preferable to an appointed official being held accountable is the day this country's fragile experiment begins to die. In my June 5th letter to the town, I asked to start having these tough conversations. As it may be, this is an easy one. I'm seeing many people asking the wrong questions or none at all, so I'll start. I'll be reaching out to Ethics Committee Chairman Tom Moore. According to public record, the RTM Board of Ethics last met on October 10th, 2018 for 32 minutes. Article 5 in the Town Code of Ordinances is the Code of Ethics. This article has seemingly not been revised since 1990, with the majority remaining apparently untouched since 1978. How does the RTM Board of Ethics conduct oversight in town officials and their actions? Should that oversight exist, how did the citizen find readily available comments in the course of 10 minutes before the Board of Ethics Committee? Should that oversight not exist, or not in a constructive capacity, why? Finally, how is the Ethics Committee going to change to further ensure things like this don't happen again? I've been made aware through unproven and notional back channels of alleged pushback legal and otherwise, as a result of my letters and my comments made about certain parties here this evening. Certainly, speculative remarks are held by me with little to no substantive regard. However, any thinly veiled attempt to silence these actions for what they are, speaking truth to power, is exactly what is wrong with the system. The blind eyes of justice will degrade to dust long before the bonds of injustice compel the people to concede their liberties. Long gone are the days that we the people will tolerate an entrenched privileged class silencing the truth, that we will stand idly by watching injustice infect our system of government, or that we will roll over on our own volition and let the hands of arbitrary power control this scene. I thank the Board of Selectmen for allowing me to make public comment, and I yield the remaining of my time back to the Board.
Reed, thank you very much. We're all very interested in your perspective. I want to thank you for coming forward, and we will make sure that your comments are considered as dialogue continues on these important matters. Okay, so there's no other public comment from virtually, Kate?
No.
Okay.
And I emailed to you all the emails that were received as public comment, or
For the record, can we just state publicly who the speaker was and address that normally would be made?
I'm sorry, that was Reed Barthold. I do not have his address in front of me, but he is a Darien resident.
Okay, thank you.
It's Richmond Drive, Darien, but I don't know the house number. I can get that for the minutes.
34.
Okay, thank
34
you.
Richmond Drive.
Thank you, Wayne.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving on. Agenda review.
May I?
Yes,
Oh,
sure.
Kristen.
No, you go.
Go ahead, Sarah.
I am glad that the town acted quickly when we learned of the tweets by Mr. Joyce. My only concern was something that I had mentioned to you, was that was something maybe we should have known about. The post had been up for a while, and I had no idea how many had seen the post and interpreted the comments to mean that the town of Darien shared Mr. Joyce's feelings. I think the time has come for Darien to have a policy in place regarding social media. We need to determine the standards that we want our elected and appointed officials to be held to. Whether or not we like it, we are viewed in our personal life to represent the town. This policy should be created and put into place as soon as we can. The spring was a time where many of our elected and appointed officials were disseminating important information to our residents. As such, our personal accounts are open up to residents to be viewed in conjunction with the town of Darien. In practice, we probably should be using the official town of Darien accounts going forward. Like many, I believe in process and policy, and I do believe that if we had these going forward, I think it might be helpful for us.
Thank you. Kate, would you like to share that we do have a social media policy?
We do have a social media policy.
Awesome.
It's regarding what we post as a town. I would say, I don't think we cannot enforce restrictions on employees or appointed officials, what they do with their private social media accounts. We could certainly address it if we had an employee who was making disparaging comments about elected officials or taxpayers.
Of course.
In the social media account, we could address that. But if you want to go out and whatever you want to post on social media, I believe, Wayne, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but we don't have the authority to tell you. You have, I would suggest what you want to think about as a board is how you address that when considering people for appointments. And a suggestion I had made to Jamie when this came up was a question that was asked of me when I was interviewed for this position was there anything in my background that might prove embarrassing to the town? And I think that's something you could certainly ask appointees if there's anything in their social media that might prove embarrassing or might be disqualifying. But
So I'd like to just break here and say that I wholeheartedly support that. It's very sad day that we have to make sure that's part of our deliberation process. I would also suggest that it should become a routine part of the process for the Republican Town Committee and the Democratic Town Committee to do the same, so that anyone that they refer to us has at least had one round of that inquiry. Sarah, you and I had a little exchange that we get from the RTC an application process. That application hasn't changed in all the years I've been involved. We don't get anything from the DTC except a resume of some kind. So Kate has begun to craft a draft of what we might adopt with our collective input as the Board of Selectmen's application that we would give to the two town committees, consistent,
Right.
that will include a statement of that sort for them to affirmatively acknowledge that there's nothing that would be embarrassing to them, to the board, or to the town. So when that draft is ready, it will circulate to us for our input.
I think it's important. I think what's unfortunate is that what happened with Mr. Joyce is not the only time that's ever happened. I mean, it's happened in other towns with other officials, and I'm just wondering if, I know that legally we can't say what we can't, but there have been things that people have posted that have caused their removal from different positions, and I'm just wondering if it may be time for discussion about putting parameters around it. It's just a thought, and so, but I do think, secondly, that we should probably be using, Town of Darien accounts going forward. Maybe we should have a Board of Selectmen account. I'm not on Instagram or Twitter, but maybe something that we could use, and not on Facebook, so that we can be posting like all of the, the COVID stats, or, geez, we're opening up now, and stage 4, we're going to be opening a town hall, or.
Right. So we do have a Town of Darien Twitter account and a Town of Darien Facebook page.
Okay.
And then we have some various departments have pages and Twitter accounts. We don't have an Instagram account because Town of Darien was taken by the Board of Realtors. But the social media policy addresses for our various boards and commissions what they can post, how they're supposed to post when they are posting as the Town of Darien.
Okay.
And I would say there's nothing to stop you as a selectman from creating your Sarah Newman Selectman account
That's
on
true.
Twitter to use as your official
That's true. You won't see me on Twitter. Okay. Yep.
Facebook.
Yep.
But you certainly could do that. You could do Selectman Newman and use your Town of Darien email account to create that.
Got it.
Why doesn't the policy restrict publishing of town business to town-specific social media accounts? I'm wondering if
Because people, well,
you can't restrict people from posting on their personal account, correct? But they shouldn't be.
They're not supposed to post.
They should be primarily conducting town-related business and notifications of town information through their personal account. That should be done through a town-related account, no?
So I think there's a difference between echoing or forwarding town business. Like if I were to post something about the town reopening on June 29th and you want to retweet that with your personal account, I don't see the issue with that.
Well, if your initial post was the town reopening was done on the town site, then that's appropriate. If your initial post was the primary source of dissemination of the information about the town reopening on your personal site, to me that seems inappropriate.
Well, is it
I would say it's
comparable, like I'm thinking of our state legislator, I mean, they have their own personal, there's the state comes out with their comments, and then our locally elected have their own state, to your point,
Right.
sites that would echo or share information, so that's what I'm thinking,
Yeah.
what Kate's talking
And
about.
I'm thinking
for
what you're-
echoing and sharing, I think that's completely true, but the primary source of disseminate, the primary point of origination of dissemination of information should not be from a personal account, whether it be a David Martin Selectman account or a David Martin personal account. The initial post, the initial origination of the material should come from the Town of Darien account.
Most of our information dissemination happens through our website because our town websites, we don't have social media managers for our social media posts. Kate's it.
I'm in. So, David, what you're saying is, it's not ideal if someone were to do it from their personal, but I know, we have some department heads who are more tech savvy than others. And as James said, we don't have a web manager.
Right.
We don't have a social media manager. So
We don't have
I am the Town of Darien Twitter account. So if Jamie wants something sent out, I get an email from her, and it might be Saturday night saying, send this out. And, it's me doing it. It's not a social media person. Pam does it for Parks and Rec. David Knopf does it for the Health Department. I'm not sure who does it at the police department. It's with their public information officer. So it's our staff doing their best managing that stuff.
And to me, that sounds like you're making a very good argument for the fact that there should be a web manager and social media manager, and probably a chief technology officer for the town to plot technology strategy for the town.
Or communication.
But you won't get an argument from Kate and I on that last one.
Yeah, I was going to say that. I think that.
Yeah, but our tech department isn't a software social media department either. So
Right.
there's a big distinction between those two.
Yeah, but that sounds, it's a bigger discussion we should probably
Yeah.
have separately, but
Yep.
I agree with you
Yeah.
completely on that. So, yeah, let's
Yep.
let's go. with
It'd be
that.
great if we could afford someday to have a PIO for the town.
That would be
The
fantastic.
police department has a PIO,
Right.
but it's all about taxpayer dollars.
Yeah,
I
but
think-
and
I
I
think
the
the
PIO,
time
the
has come.
police department is an
You can
officer.
push that
who-
into the
that's
next
just a
budget.
part of their duties. It's not, their sole function.
Right.
Correct.
But I look forward to seeing what you pull together, kind of circling back a little bit to the application. I think that's a very good idea, that
Yeah.
application comes from the Board of Selectmen. Something I was thinking of sort of adding to that is I would love to see that in that application and more transparency on our town website. But I feel that there are many residents in this town who do not affiliate with either of the two major political parties, and I would love to see the opportunity and the transparency for them to approach, and it does
And apply.
happen. But I think we could be out there a little bit more visibly from the town website to post either openings, information about the respective boards and commissions, which we do have. We have that on the town site. But how can we facilitate getting this word out?
That's a good point, Krista. We have quite a few unaffiliated voters in our
We have
town.
Yeah.
thousands of
Yeah.
unaffiliated
Right.
voters, so
Yeah.
I would love to see them be brought
Included.
into this
Yeah.
process.
Yeah, no, that's great, because that would be a good thing, because, right now, basically, the town committees do the work of searching the people out for you.
Absolutely, absolutely, and that's their role, and I understand that their respective roles, but I feel like we're not meeting the
Including.
needs of a segment of our population of
Yeah.
independents.
Yeah.
Or
Well,
unaffiliated.
I would like to say that I've certainly made it a practice that the boards of selectmen that I've sat on, we have always entertained an appointment of an unaffiliated voter.
Oh, no, absolutely, I'm not saying
It's,
that.
it's just that the town committees, some more so than others, don't really, they want to seat someone who's a Republican or a Democrat. So it does leave a large section of our population without the opportunity to be courted by a town committee. And I believe strongly that we should entertain anyone who wants to serve in appointed office, especially because they're the second largest voting bloc in our town.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's just a way to get the information out there, not to take away from the other two vehicles, but just to, it's a little bit what you were mentioning before, David. So to me, that was for a future meeting, if you want to bring something back and we can talk about it more.
When you design the application, I'm going to ask if we could consider asking for any potential nominees to disclose what social media they use and what identifier would be necessary in terms of login name, or, if they have like an unusual name on Twitter, can they provide that, so that to the extent that we as the Board of Selectmen
Can we ask that question?
want to review their social media activity, we can identify them readily.
I'll defer to.
Want me to answer?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Pardon me?
Go answer it, please.
But Wayne, would you mind coming up so that you're on the microphone?
Yeah, sure.
Or up, or either there or at the table, wherever you're comfortable.
I think it's a fair question, David. I think the difficulty is that it was adopted in 2016, a statute which is very clear that that kind of information, that kind of request is inappropriate for an employee. Was a little bit unclear in the definition of the statute. I have not yet checked the federal regulations on this. They define an employee as any person engaged in service to an employer in the business of his or her employer. So one can make an argument that in the general parlance, you would not consider an applicant for any post to be an employee. But if you look at the definition that's used in this statute, you can make what I think is a very valid argument that that person would be under that definition of that statute an employee, and you would be prohibited from seeking that kind of information.
So you wouldn't be allowed to ask for their username?
Under this statute, as it clearly applies to employees, you would not.
Interesting.
I'll get you a copy of the statute.
Yeah, no, I think that was
I trust
surprising.
your interpretation. That's cool.
What is not entirely clear to me, and it's so new, there is virtually no case law on it. But what is unclear is, did they really intend the word employee to be an applicant to a board? An employee and an applicant to boards or members of boards are treated the same in different statutes, such as identification. Whether they clearly intended it to be applicable to an employee in this scenario is not entirely clear. I have not yet had a chance to check the legislative history on it, which may be helpful. But as I read it, there is a very valid argument to be made that you would not have the right to ask that kind of question to an applicant.
How old is this statute?
2016.
So
So there's no case law against it yet?
Not yet.
We don't want to start it.
yeah,
No,
it's not.
I'm not suggesting that. I'm just saying that there's no precedence to show.
Two things I'm going to check is to see what, if any, federal statute applies. And secondly, sometimes, not all the time, the legislative history, what they talked about in the Senate and the House can be helpful. I haven't had a chance to check that yet.
Right.
Wait,
But
is
I
it
will.
possible, along the same lines, what I think would be helpful, as we're talking about if we have our master application, also to have clarification, to your point here, David, too, is that what may we ask and what may we not ask? I know I'm certainly familiar from the board side what we can, but I think perhaps that would be helpful for us to have. So when we go into the final interviews that we are...
I think the point that Kate made, and the question that one hears on a regular basis at various levels, is have you done anything to embarrass yourself or the board of the town? I think it's a fair question, one that should be posed. Kate and I can talk about other potential questions.
Right, I mean, I'm sure there's a list of others that we shouldn't be asking that I know off the top of my head. I would just like to see that to make sure.
Well, once we've had a chance to offer input onto the draft, I think it would be wise to run it by not only our HR director, Lori Dunn, but also Wayne.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so as I say, I think there are two things. You want to make sure that what we put on the form is appropriate.
Correct.
But also maybe give you some guidance as to things that you should not ask in
Correct.
an interview.
Correct.
And yeah, we'll have to look at what the difference is. You know, there are definitely things you never ask an employee in an interview, but may not be forbidden when you're looking at somebody going on the board.
This statute is very clear and very definitive as to what you cannot do, what you should not do, what you are not allowed to do
Yes, yes.
To an employee.
to an employee.
Okay. Appreciate that.
Okay.
No, that's wonderful.
Yep.
Long arm of the law is wonderful.
Okay. Anything else? We've got a bunch of follow-ups. All right, hearing nothing else, then I'll entertain a motion.
Sorry, I was just going to ask, we did receive several emails for public
Yes.
comment.
Mhm.
So we have all seen them.
Yes.
Do we share those in some way to make it public? How would, if XYZ citizen wanted to see the public comment from the emails
Yeah.
that were submitted, how would they?
They'll be part of they'll be attached to our meeting minutes. They'll be public documents.
Fair enough.
Yep. Okay. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Kip. May I have a second? Second. Thank you, Sarah. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.